Chatham. Welcome to the October 22nd, 2024, 13th Annual Town of Chatham Budget Summit, which is a joint meeting of the Select Board and the Finance Committee, as well as the department heads here in Chatham and the Monomoy Regional School District seniors. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chair. Seeing no such notification, I will proceed. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31, 2025. This meeting of the joint meeting of the Chatham Select Board and Finance Committee is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 203-386-491, #, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, Xfinity Channel 1072, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. I will commence the meeting by establishing a quorum of the Select Board. Mr. Metters.
Present.
Mr. Dykens.
Present.
And Ms. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Nicastro.
Present.
And Mr. Schell is present, and I will now turn it over to the chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mike. I will similarly engage in a roll call to determine a quorum. Tommy Doan, I know, is absent. Barb Madison.
Here.
John Papalardo. Here. Joanne Sprague.
Here.
Andy Young.
Here.
Kristen Andres. Tracy Shields.
Present.
Eric Whiteley.
Here.
And the chair is present. All right. Jill, over to you, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs, and welcome to our 13th Annual Budget Summit. It's our 13th, but it happens to be the first for our Finance Director, Carrie Mazzarol, who is standing right beside me. And I also want to do a quick introduction of the department heads and team that are also in the audience with us. First, I'm not sure, some of you have met him, Nick Cantella. He's our Assistant Finance Director, Assistant Town Accountant. Welcome, Nick. This is your first summit. We have Fire Chief Justin with us. Behind him, we had DPW Director Rob, Director of Community Development Katie, Director of Natural Resources Greg Berman. I can't see if anyone else is on Teams with us. And with us, we also have Michael McMillan from the Monomoy Regional School District as their business manager. So welcome, everybody. We entitled this Budget Summit. Oh, let's look. I'm sorry. We have Amy Howe, who's our Deputy Director of Community Services. And someone with a PH that's not coming to mind very quickly, but we'll get to everybody as we go along. So we're calling this Stay in the Course. It's our financial state of the town, but preliminary. So a lot of what you'll see tonight are assumptions looking forward, but also a look back. To move through the agenda, the first item is anchoring our priorities. And this is laying the groundwork for decisions that will guide us through the year ahead. We'll then have an overview of the current fiscal year 2025 budget, our FY 2026 budget revenue projections, our FY 2026 budget and 3-year operating budget expense forecasts, our FY 2026 through FY 2030, a capital improvement plan. Carrie will also talk about debt service. We'll look at recommendations and reports received, and then we'll move forward with our FY 2026 budget review, process directives, and calendar. Last year, the Select Board embarked on a goal-setting process that didn't just look at the calendar year or the next fiscal year, but it looked at FY '25 and beyond. And in particular, the vision statement notes Chatham in 2030 will be a forward-looking, engaged, and inclusive community of demographically diverse year-round citizens that maintains a unique integration and preservation of its pristine environment, promotion of healthy economy, fiscally responsible and responsive leadership, and a welcoming environment for all of Chatham. When we worked on this vision statement, we also looked at our SMART goals. And a SMART goal is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. The goals that you'll see, the objectives and the goals that you see before you are what we called our goal buckets. So we were looking at year-round housing, educational excellence, foster a vibrant and sustainable local economy, environmental conservation, coastal resiliency and natural resources, water management, and respond effectively to the needs of a diverse, welcoming, and livable Chatham. We adopted these on January 27th, 2004, and the next review will be next week on October 29th. I'm going to turn it over to Finance Director Carey to lead us through the next slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Good evening, everybody. So this slide goes over the last few years of the budget strategies or names of the budgets that were previously. This year, FY 2026, we're calling it Staying the Course. For 2026, Chatham will continue to adhere to principles of resilience and sustainability. We will ensure a balanced budget that provides essential goods and services to all community members. This slide goes over our budgetary objectives. Protect core services and uphold values. Ensure a fiscal responsibility with fiscal prudence. Present a balanced budget. And fund community priorities for FY 2026 and beyond. This slide goes over the town budgetary components. So when we look at our budget, they consist of revenues and expenses and other capital items. We want a budget that is balanced with revenues and expenses. As we begin the FY 2026 budget, we will look at revenues such as the tax levy, local receipts, and other available funds. And when we look at the department's requests for the operating budgets, we look at the educational assessments and the capital requests for all departments. The operating budget for 2025 is $40.6 million. This includes the $470,000 that was voted at town meeting for the public safety contracts. And it also includes the new debt approved at the end of FY 2024. We have educational assessments that total $10.8 million for Monomoy Regional School and the Cape Cod Tech, with a grand total of $51.5 million. There was also a capital plan in the amount of $2.4 million, which was funded from free cash with $2.2 million and other available funds in the amount of $213,000. So this slide goes over our current FY 2025 tax rate. So as you can see, the value of Chatham has increased 6.30%. So FY 2025, the valuation is $12 billion. The tax rate decrease 10 cents, so it's 3.47, a decrease of 2.80%. And the average tax bill for FY 2025 is $5,810. 2025 budget drivers. As we think back at our budget for 2025, there was increases for contractual obligations such as the water and sewer operations. We had CMAS contract. We saw increases for our health insurance general liability insurance, debt, technology, and also contractual increases for our salaries. And we also saw an increase to the Chatham Elementary School in FY 2025. This slide goes over the available funding sources that we look at when we go through our budget process. So sources for our operating budget, we use the tax levy to fund 70% of our operating budget. This is increased annually by 2.5% plus new growth. Local receipts, which funds approximately 16% of the budget. We have state aid. We don't usually receive a lot of that because most of it goes to the school. Our debt exclusions, those are added on top of our Proposition 2.5. We have excess levy capacity. And then we have other available funding sources such as special revenue funds. We have receipts reserved for appropriation, and they fund about 8% of our budget. And then we have the water fund, and that also funds just the water department at about 6% of the budget. Assumptions for 2026. When we work through the budget process, we estimate our revenues conservatively. Property tax increases 2.5% plus new growth, and new growth right now is estimated conservatively. Local receipts are estimated at 85% of the prior year's actuals. We are estimating 85% based on the closing of FY 2024. We also estimate what we are going to use from other available funds. We estimate our expenditures based on priorities and level services for the entire community. We look at the past 2 prior fiscal years of actual expenditures per department. Our debt is based on the most current debt schedule. And as we predict an early assumption for educational assessments, health benefits, retirement, and insurance, we begin going through the budget and operational requests in the next couple of weeks with the departments. So some of the projections for FY 2026. The levy base is increased by 2.5%, which is $953,000. We're estimating new growth at $350,000. So we are estimating an increase of 1.3 just for those. And then we add our debt for 2026. The estimate for local receipts is 85% of the FY 2024 actuals, and that is at $10.8 million. State aid is level to 2025, as we don't know the figures yet. And we are very early in the stage of the budget, and we will adjust as we move forward with the budget. We also have free cash at $11 million. Free cash is used to fund the capital budget and other one-time capital expenditures. Per financial policies as well as best practices, free cash should not be used to balance the operating budget. Free cash for FY 2025 funded the majority of the capital budget, the capital plan, I should say. So going over local receipts and what they are. Local receipts are derived at the local level for programs, services, and amenities, directly influenced by behavior, economy, and trends. Types of local receipts, they come from fees, programs, services, excise tax, transfer station stickers, beach stickers, parking fines, and departmental fees, and other miscellaneous. This slide goes over the local receipt growth that we have seen over the past 4 years, plus the estimated amount for 2025. These are revenues related to economic growth. They are considered elastic revenue sources. Just like new growth for the tax levy, there is motor vehicle taxes, as well as building permits and construction related to permit fees. These revenues are sensitive to changes in the level of economic activity. Chatham's revenues from economic growth have been steady and have increased over the years. But because local receipts can change based on the economy, future growth is uncertain this early in the stage as we build on our budget. So this is a comparison of the first quarter of FY 2024 versus FY 2025 from July through September. As we think about the FY 2026 budget, it's important to look back past trends. Our revenues are tracking positively to our budget projection as we're showing a positive number for the total amount. Again, local receipts being an elastic revenue, they are based on economic drivers and can fluctuate in a positive or negative way. So looking back at our hotel motel tax, short-term rentals took effect beginning 7/1/2019. However, they were not broken out by the Department of Revenue until 2021. So this slide shows the combination of traditional and short-term rentals over the past years. Whoops, I'm sorry. As you can see, the revenue has been progressively increasing, and there is a slight dip in FY 2024, which I think that we need to keep an eye on going forward. So this slide shows the breakout between short-term and traditional lodging, which started in FY 21. Looking at the close of FY 2024, both the short-term and the traditional rentals were slightly less in FY 2024 compared to FY 2023. In FY 2024, the short-term rental was $50,000 less than FY 2023. And the traditional lodging in 2024 was $36,000 less than FY 2023. Just like I said before, it's just something that we want to keep an eye on as we move forward. So in FY 2024, the 2% of local room occupancy tax was approved by the legislature. The approved 2% was for 1% to go to Chatham Elementary School, a receipts reserve for appropriation fund, and the other 1% is to go to attainable housing, another receipts reserve for appropriation fund. Both funds received $1.01 million in FY 2024. These funds need to be appropriated at town meeting for expenditure. Moving on to meals tax. As you can see on this slide, the meals tax revenue has been on a steady incline over the past couple years, increasing 93.47% since 2021. In 2021, meals tax was $349,000 that we received. And in FY 2024, we received $677,000. Other available funds that we have are options for capital and funding the budget, operating budget, are, free cash, revolving funds, receipts reserved for appropriation, Chapter 90, we use that for road infrastructure, waterways user fee, revolving fund, and the wastewater capital stabilization fund, just to name a few. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Carrie, there's
Yeah.
a roughly 84% increase in receipts received from fines. Is that attributable, do we think, to the new technology deployed on Main Street, or is it just bad parking?
So, are you talking, so those are the parking fines. So we believe it has to do with the new program that was set up with the police department and the young kids walking around and giving out tickets. So we've seen an increase in people paying their fines for parking.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're going to have a presentation on the last season with our new parking enforcement software. Chief Anderson will provide it either next week or in the next coming weeks.
Terrific, thanks.
Okay. Moving on. Free cash is one of the options that we have available for us to use. Remaining unrestricted funds from operations of the previous fiscal year, including unexpended free cash from the previous year. Actual receipts in excess of revenue estimated on the tax recap sheet, and unspent amounts in budget line items. Unpaid property taxes and certain deficits reduce that amount that can be certified as free cash. The calculation of free cash is based on the June 30th balance sheet. Free cash is not available for appropriation until certified by the Director of Accounts. So this slide goes over our historical free cash going back to 2021. Our free cash was certified at $11 million at the end of FY 2024. As you can see, this amount is higher than has been in the past. But at the end of FY 2023, that amount certified is lower than it has been in the past. At the end of 2023, there were deficits in other funds, such as borrowing accounts and grant accounts, that the town did not receive funding for or reimbursements for, which charged our free cash in the amount of around $5 million. During FY 2024, we received reimbursements and funding to cover the deficits charged against us. And due to this, the $5 million was released, and what we should have received at the end of 2023, we're now receiving at the end of 2024. So this slide actually shows what our free cash would have looked like at the end of FY 2023 and end of FY 2024 if no charges were applied to our free cash. We would have received around $6 million versus the $11 million in 2025 and $7.6 million for the end of 2023. I did a quick calculation on the last 3 years of free cash certification just to see where we fell based on our financial policies. And if I'm not understanding this correctly, just please correct me, but my interpretation is it's based on the actual expenditures in the current fiscal year, not including educational assessments. Based on these findings at the end of 2022, which is, if you look at the slide, it would have been 2023 up there. The percentage is 23% that we received that year. To be within the reach of the financial policies of 3 to 5%, we would have only received around $978,000 or $1.6 million. At the end of 2023, the percentage based on last year's amount that we received was 7.86%. Again, to be in reach of the 3 to 5% of the financial policy, we would have only received 1 to 1.7 million. And then at the end of 2024, of course, the percentage is much higher at 30%. But to be in reach of the financial policy of 3 to 5%, we would have only received between 1.1 and 1.8 million. I understand that it's the goal to be within 3 to 5% for free cash, but I would like to review this policy with the Finance Committee. It also notes that our unrestricted unassigned fund balance will be around 10 to 15%, which free cash is based on our undesignated, unreserved, unassigned balance. So, as it states in our financial policies. So this is just something that I want to mention to you as we move forward and think about things. And anyways, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Carrie, just, I think it would be useful to maybe help prompt that discussion or get more knowledge about its discussion to understand where that 6.186 million balance emanates from, stems from. Is it unexpended free cash from the previous year? Sounds as though there's prior year influence here. Actual receipts in excess of revenue estimated on the tax recap sheet, and or unspent amounts in budget line items. I'm particularly interested in the last one, unspent budget amounts in the budget line items. I'd love to see it parsed out by those different classifications, if you will, what drives that number. And I think it'd be very interesting.
Yes, we can definitely do that for you. So it is based on
You don't have to-
unexpended.
Yeah, you don't have to answer it tonight, but I just really think it would help, it would.
No, that's fine. And-
Be very helpful to the
Yeah,
conversation.
absolutely, I
Yeah.
can get that for you, but it is definitely from unexpended expenditures and also revenues that we've received.
Right.
So it's a combination of both. So it's not just one or the other, it's a combination.
And then.
And we
begs-
also turned back like 400,000, I think, free cash, but, yeah.
It just begs more questions about unspent amounts and budget line
Yeah,
items.
no, I totally agree with
Could we
you.
not hire, did we not, blah, blah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dean?
Yeah, I want to join in that request because it'll give us some view as to whether we're over budgeting
Yes,
historically.
yep.
You used the term, we received.
Mm-hmm.
What are we receiving from? I just wanted, I didn't understand.
So you're talking about receiving the funds?
You said, when you were comparing each year, you said in such and such a year, we received X dollars, and the next year we received Y dollars. What did you mean?
I think it was, when you were explaining what, you said what we would have received if we
Yes.
were within the policy percentages.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
exactly,
and that's
yes.
what, it confused me as well.
Sorry, I just wanted to make it clear that we are receiving more than the 3 to 5%. So I just wanted to
But-
say what we would, if we received 3 to 5%, the amount.
But the what that you're receiving is free cash.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's a certification of free cash. So
Okay, all
when
right.
Carrie talked about the DOR charging us or holding back free cash, it was because the funds came in after the close of the fiscal year, so then they released it to us.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that's what you were asking about receiving.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So I
Yeah,
just
okay.
would just make the comment, so now we have $11 million in free cash.
Yes,
And, that's going to be viewed by some people as a big piggyback.
Right.
Big piggy bank to, and I think we ought to, I just want to say, maybe Joanne will agree with me on this one. I think there's something there that might be best used going back to the taxpayers. That's all I'm saying. There, she's got her finger up. Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
So I think, as evidenced by our commentary and observations on the whole topic of free cash over the last handful of years, we would be willing partners for that conversation. I think having guidelines that are routinely and consistently ignored is a bad practice. So I think, again, now is not the time, but we would readily or happily be willing to have a chat about all of this.
that would be great.
I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to note that the DOR's best practices, that's where we got this from originally, was 3 to 5%, because there's municipalities out there that can't even certify 1% for free cash. And so absolutely looking at that, looking at the components of free cash, including our revenue projections. Every finance director will, which Carrie's probably going to kick me, but we have to, with our projections at 85% of actuals, it's gone up a little bit more, but as we get to the next quarter closeout, then we can feel a little bit more comfortable about using more revenues for our forecast for the next fiscal year.
And that does happen as we move and work on the tax rate as well. We look at the current fiscal year and how much we've received in local receipts, and we can increase it at that time as well, so,
Yeah, I think we recognize that this is more art than science.
yeah.
But again, kind of consistently running, not 3 to 5, but in some instances, 13 to 15, it begs consideration. I understand the rating agencies love it. I'm not so sure the taxpayers are so happy,
Right.
to Dean's point.
So, John, go ahead.
Thank you. I focus on the definition of free cash that you gave. Can you explain the unpaid property taxes?
Yeah, so.
How that functions?
So, going back to the slide, they actually subtract out the unpaid property taxes that we have on, so property taxes and real estate taxes is receivable to the town, so we have to book it on our ledger. And when we don't have that amount paid to us, they actually subtract that out from our free cash. So property taxes, real estate, they're combined.
Okay.
So does that mean
It reduces our free cash.
Right, so I don't pay my property taxes, let's say it's, what was the average, $5,800, so I don't pay it. So that $5,800 is held back from the certification process.
Correct.
And then I pay my $5,800 late with fines or however that works. Does that $5,800 then come back to the town?
Yeah.
So
But it looks at-
where's the $5,800 that's subtracted? Where does it live?
It just,
It lives on a spreadsheet, basically. And I want to note our collection rate is like 98%.
Yeah.
It's not really a high amount of funds, but they call it reserved, so it's reserved on the spreadsheet. So we still have the funds that come in, but it takes the next year to certify for free cash.
Okay, so it does catch up.
It
yes.
does, yeah.
And if it doesn't, the property's auctioned and the town gets paid?
It's a very complex process that isn't just the next fiscal year it happens. It takes a while with every opportunity for someone to be able to pay off their taxes.
Thank you.
You're
So,
welcome.
unlike John, who wants a graduate course in all of this, I need to go back to first grade here. And I just want to understand, I saw the paper that certified our free cash at 11.186 million. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Now we have this chart, this other chart that says if no hits, and the numbers go up in 2024 and down in 2025. And I'm just trying to understand, what is that like we're excluding non-recurring events? Or what are we doing that gets us from what was certified to these, what I presume are hypothetical numbers in that second chart?
So Carrie presented a smoothing calculation of what if that $5 million was able to be certified and released to the town. And so her next slide,
But the 5 million is, where is the 5 million?
It's in the 11 million currently. So last year, at the beginning of end of FY 2023, we only received 2.6 because we had $5 million of hits. So we're
Hits meaning
charges against
money
us.
that cannot be included in certified.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
So the 5 million is coming from a prior year, is what you're
Correct,
saying?
yes.
Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
so it carried forward into the next
It
Well,
fiscal
carried
year.
forward.
I
into the
take it,
next.
it carried from 2023, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That is
All right,
correct.
I've got it. I've
Yeah,
got it.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
And for the sake of clarity, those include such things as we discussed as kind of grants that were anticipated but not received in a timely fashion.
Correct.
Or financing plans that weren't executed.
Yes.
When anticipated.
Yep.
Things like that.
Yep.
Borrowing authorization. So that 5 million isn't because there's $5 million in term backs from the departments. And it's not an error or anything. It just was a timing issue for them to close out the books. It's a profit and loss thing on a P&L sheet, basically.
Yep.
It's a timing difference is the way I look at it. to be
Yes,
honest with you.
exactly.
Purely a timing difference.
Yep.
I don't want everybody, if I might, I don't want everybody to get all worked up about the war chest that we have here, especially before we finish the budget, before we look at all the issues in the budget, because we know what kind of demands we have for monies.
Yeah,
moving
okay.
forward, coming down.
Okay,
So
all right,
thank you.
we'll hold that conversation. Okay, thank you.
So moving on. Budget forecasts. We have attached a 5-year forecast, which by nature is conservative. We look for trends, and with inflation rising, we pay close attention to local taxes that may fluctuate as spending may decrease. Salary and wage increases based on contractual obligations, contract increases for FY 2026. There are health insurance increases, property and liability insurance increase, and debt issuance. So this chart shows the operational growth going back to 2020 to 10. This chart includes educational assessments, but does not include debt. As you can see on the chart, there has been a steady incline in the operating budget. The total for FY 2025 is 43.8. And again, this includes education, but does not include debt. FY 2026 budget forecast, reviewing past performance and forecast between 2022 and 2028. As we begin planning for the FY 2026 budget, we will be looking at requests from all departments, prior trends, current year adjustments, and future mandates within the context of the impact on operations and the taxpayer. This slide shows, sorry, I need a drink of water. This slide shows the past recently closed fiscal years and the current fiscal year budget. Over the past 3 years, the operating budget has an average increase of approximately 7%, including educational costs and debt service. The increases have been due to adding additional staff, salary contracts, insurance increases, benefit increases, increases for contracted services, and increases to utility costs. So these are the forecasts for FY 2026 through 2028. These budget assumptions are based on the past performance and are subject to change. Based on the last 3 years, the overall budget has an average increase of 7%, like I just mentioned. So I am estimating a projection that in FY 2026, we will see an estimated increase of the operating budget of around 6%, with an average increase to the education assessments of the same. As we work through the budget process, this amount is about to change, as it is just a preliminary judgment, as we have not received any final numbers yet. My prediction is being based on the past 3 years' average, and we're still seeing percentage increases of around 20 to 30% for our general liability insurance. We've seen 10% increases for our health insurance benefits, other increased cost of benefits, due to adding positions, and increases for our debt service as we borrow for ongoing projects. There has been contractual increases to salaries, IT software has increased, and general contracts such as the CMAS, water, and sewer contracts have increased. The projection includes such increases as mentioned. As we move forward through the budget process, we will be looking at the past year's actual expenditures in departments and really taking that into consideration.
Carrie,
Yes.
just, I mean, it appears, I understand what you've said, and probably most of what I'm about to ask about is in that description, but there are big changes from 26 to 27 to 28 in terms of the overall growth of the expenses, and I'm just wondering, what are the assumptions that drive that difference year to year?
So in 27 and 28, the difference between 26, 27, 28 is the public safety contracts.
Okay. Enough said. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to go over the water fund budget. I've included the water fund in this presentation as I wanted everybody to see the water fund budget over the past few years and to get a visual why it's important to increase the water rates. And I understand this is under review right now, but I just want you all to be aware of it. The water budget has increased 10.7% over the past 3 years. As you can see, the final numbers for the water budget ending in FY24, the expenditures actually exceeded the revenues, and the deficit is funded from the water fund's retained earnings. There is currently a balance in the retained earnings of around $400,000. So if we don't see the revenues start to increase and cover our expenses in 2025, we'll be using our retained earnings again at the end of FY 2025.
Just a quick question. Were we looking at rates at all?
We are looking at rates currently. I know that's in progress.
Okay, what'd you say we had in the retained earnings? I'm sorry, Carrie.
We have around $400,000 in retained earnings.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to add on to what Jeff was asking about rates, the select board has not yet formally referred the review of the rates back to the Water and Sewer Committee. Is this being done at the staff level at the present time? Because I don't recall
Yes.
that we've done it.
Yes, I believe so.
Is it, so the plan would be for you to come to the select board? And
Yes.
then we would refer it to water and sewer for a recommendation, I guess?
Is that how it goes?
We would likely present it first to the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee and
Okay.
then receive their comments and then present it to the select board.
They would submit a recommendation to us as they did last time?
Yes, that's what they typically do.
Okay.
I just got a quick follow-up. Would that be in time for this budget season, the recommendation?
If we get them in time, maybe we can get them in January and have the rates increased. But they would definitely have to be increased for 2026 budget.
Corey?
This is a small snippet to the broader question, which is obviously much deeper, but, so if we have these preservation of water policies that we've kind of been putting together, and I think this is a conversation the EDC had a couple of years ago about getting more and more people on private wells. So you get more and more people on private watering system, less revenue for the town. What is the forecast that you see happening in that direction? And are we going to get more and more people on private systems, creating less paying taxpayers onto this system? So,
Yeah.
you know, that's, I think, part of the bigger forecast. We've got to kind of get an idea of where we're headed with that, because if more and more people do pull off the town system, then they're obviously not paying the water rates, which we're going to drive that,
Right.
that pot down.
Yep, yep, absolutely. Shereen?
Just a note, I believe we had the Economic Committee look at water rates before and give us an assessment. I'd like to see that happen again.
Okay, yep, thank you. We'll do that. Okay,
Any
so
other questions? Go ahead, please.
moving on to the water for 2026 to 2028. So I did the same with the water department. For 26 through 28, I was projecting an increase of around 6.92%. And this is based on the current debt service that the water fund has, and projecting around 5.35% increase in the expenses for 2026. It could be lower, but I'm trying to make sure that we have enough money to cover the contracts that we currently have. The expenses have increased on an average of 9.6% over the past 3 years. So I'm being, I think, kind of fair for that. As you can see, the debt service, is dropping off over the next few years. But this is just based on our current schedule as of today. So if we obviously we have more water projects, the more debt that we incur, the higher the debt is going to be. So I just want you to keep that in mind. This will be one of the departments that we're really going to look at this year in 2026.
Mike?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, so Carrie, two things. First, the transfer from the general fund, that's for fire suppression, the 400,000?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so we pay that over to the water department?
So the water department pays us an assessment based on indirect costs, and that's kind of for like salaries and Medicare and stuff like that. So it's around 300,000, and then the general fund is paying them 400,000. It's almost a wash.
Okay. And as you mentioned, if there are new projects, well, the debt service will go up higher, and especially if we undertake drilling a new well,
Yes.
locating and building a new well, that's going to be a significant.
Right, because the general
Increase.
fund just pays for the general fund debt, and then the water pays for the water debt.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Steve.
Carrie, if the financial policies are going to be open for some consideration regarding the free cash issue, I don't recall off the top of my head that there is a provision or provisions in our financial policies relating to the goal of not having operating departments run annual deficits.
Right.
And I wonder if that's something we might want to consider putting on the list.
Yes.
It's not just a guideline, that would be a good rule.
That would be good.
Something to think about perhaps.
Yep,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Some of the 2026 budget factors that we look at are educational budgets. They're not going to be received until mid-January. That also goes for retirement from Barnstable County and some other health insurance assessments we won't receive until maybe the end of January as well. Then we have small annual capital items. They moved to the operating budget a few years ago. So anything that is under $10,000 should be funded through the operating budget versus the capital. And then debt service as well, debt drop-off and new debt coming on for the following fiscal year.
I'm sorry, yeah, Joanne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This brings up a subject that that bothers me, has for years, when we talk about debt drop-off. We automatically, as a town, have begun to think that that means, well, we can build something else, or we can add new debt to this. And actually, the idea, from my point of view, is we should consider that money, the taxpayers, going back to relieve the taxpayer burden somehow. But I think that would be hard to institute, since most every town has gotten used to using debt drop-off to fund new capital projects.
Right.
Which reminds me, again, speaking of back to the taxpayer, when we talk about lowering our tax rate, which you know, Carrie, that I'm so appreciative of that this year, and always, but at the same time, with our evaluations increasing such, I would hazard a guess that every one of our taxpayers has received probably around a 2% increase in their tax bill.
Right.
So we have to be cognizant of that.
Yep.
While the news sounds good, we want to think about the future, and as was mentioned, problems with water supply, and what would we do, what would it cost us if we couldn't keep up with what we needed in our water supply? What do we do then? How do we pay that on top of paying off all of the other capital expenses? So those are just thoughts that I think are in the back of my mind all the time when we think about the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. John, please.
Thank you. So in the forecast, the 26, 7, and 8 forecast that was in a previous slide, you had a 6% plug for education.
Yes.
Is that based on,
That's based on the past 3 years. It's been a, did I not say? It was around 7%, I think, for the school, or 6%. 6%. So yeah, they have a 6% increase. That was the average.
that's the average?
That's the average for the past 3 years for the school. It's been a 6% increase.
Okay, so it's not based on contractual obligations or anything? The budget that we're going to receive in mid-January could be more.
We'll have, it could be more. Yep.
And it's also both the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School and the Monomoy Regional School District.
Yep. Yep. What happened to this slide? Oh, that was funny. Sorry. Additionally, some other items to keep in mind are the rising costs to insurance. We've seen, again, the health insurance increase 10%. General liability has increased around 15 to 30% over the past few years, and the cost of utilities. We will be looking at staffing and taking into consideration the staffing capacity and work stress to meet the day-to-day operational needs in departments, and take into consideration what the community has requested in terms of staffing needs, as well as reviewing other funding priorities of the town and community, such as grounds, facilities, beaches, cemeteries, transfer station, technology, and cybersecurity. Yes, Joanne?
Oh, I'm
Thank-
sorry.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start off our new budget year, if we could, with the chart you usually can send us of the number of employees.
Yep.
And the rate how that has changed through the years.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
Steve?
Gary, do we have a sense of the number of open current positions, unfilled? that
Open,
we're posting
unfilled,
for?
oh, I'm sorry, I don't know that, do you?
I think we're at 7 in total right now. I know we have 3 positions that are open from DPW. One is a grounds maintenance. The other one is a mechanic, and then the third one is, a transfer station, heavy equipment operator. And then we have a couple of positions that are open through community services. We have 2 part-time positions for the new Riders Cove Respite Adult Day Care Center, and there's a couple of more, but we're pretty close to full employment. We have a couple of public safety positions too. I think we have 1 police officer and 1 firefighter still.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Apropos of that, so we heard the Select Board heard a presentation last week from the Cemetery Commission, and they were talking about some unfilled positions, and I think they were requesting either that those be filled, or I'd have to go back and review it all, but some of them perhaps may being converted into full-time or some additional staffing. But I think it's going to be important, since we have added a number of positions in the last, I've been on the board for 10 years, we've added a lot of positions in those 10 years. And we've added a number over the last 2 or 3 years with the approval of the Finance Committee. I think I'm going to want to know, what is the advantage of hiring additional staff for some of these positions versus utilizing outside contracting, assuming that is available. I know you had some issues with the availability of contracting for the cemetery work, but that's something I'd like to see as we move forward with the budgeting process in consideration of what the personnel levels should be.
Yeah, and one of the discussion points as we move further into the budget is looking at what services we provide and what services that may no longer be needed. It's been a while since we really looked at a comprehensive review of, we seem to keep adding on new initiatives, which is fine, but we're also maintaining the initiatives that we still had from 20 years ago. So this is something that I'll discuss with the department heads, and then when we make our budget presentation, we'll talk about that. Just back to the Cemetery Commission, they were fully budgeted, fully funded, and it was just up until a couple of months ago, maybe we had a vacancy. And so we just recruited for a grounds level or DPW type of position, and we're actually getting like 30 to 40 candidates. So that's the good news for this year. We hadn't seen that in prior years. It had been pretty challenging.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I'm just going to ask how long those positions have been open, especially the ones at DPW, and was there any concern about our rates of pay compared to the private sector and other municipalities? If they've been open a long, long time, and we have had some historical difficulty recruiting, I would just take a look at rates of pay. I'm not looking to add expense, but I'm also looking to get the services, accomplished, to finish, like mowing the cemeteries. We've experimented with, just to Dean's question, we've experimented pretty deeply with subcontracting the mowing in the cemeteries without success. We had one vendor that bid, and it was off and on. It just did not work. There weren't anybody interested in doing it. So were we not offering enough? What was the rate we were offering? What's the rate in the market? So I'm interested in how long those positions that have been open. It's good to hear there's only 7 or 8, but what are the rates of pay in those positions, and are we competitive or not? Thanks.
Yeah, and that's something we've been examining, and we are currently in negotiations with our Chatham Municipal Employees Association, for which these positions are covered.
Dean?
Just on the subject of personnel generally, I'm wondering if the hiring market is alleviating a little bit, because I heard yesterday that the Director of Community Services reported that she had received 12 applicants for the position, one of the positions in the, one of the 2 positions I think you were talking about. At the respite.
The respite care,
Yeah.
yes. So
It wasn't the director, it was the new person that was hired to be the director of that program, reported that she had 12 applicants.
yeah, and we have Michelle Clark, who retired. We posted that position, and it's the projects and operations assistant. I think we got like 40 applicants. I mean, things are looking much better than they have, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's qualified candidates. I mean, we thoroughly vet them, but we have been really fortunate to get some really great candidates. So Just a few more to go. The one position that's been open, I know you don't want to get in the weeds, but
okay.
for a little bit is the deputy harbor master. So certainly we're recruiting for that one. And then the highway, there was a mechanic, heavy equipment operator position that we're reevaluating to make sure that it is for market conditions. So that's something that we found that we want to recruit. We chose to recruit at this point in the fall because we seem to get more candidates than in the busy summertime and winter.
So I don't want to confuse things here, but the way I understood what we heard from the Cemetery Commission the other night was that there was an authorization some years ago, more than 5 years ago, for 3 positions that, and budget support for that, authorization for that. For some reason, that had kind of fallen by the wayside, and what they presented us with was that as things stand today, there's an inadequate dedication of staffing resources to what's needed. Now, I may be misremembering, but I just want to put that on the table as you go forward and look at not so much what's open or what's filled, but rather specifically with respect to the cemetery.
So the cemetery positions had been full, had been funded with equipment. So we most recently have 1 vacancy. So if the thought is to now look at, do we need more DPW, grounds maintenance? Is it something that if we hire them just for cemetery, is that a year-round position? So we're looking and talking with the departments, especially with DPW. So they've had their positions, which are really our positions for DPW. And some of the equipment we've had some challenges with, but there's been no holdback and no targeting them for
No, I didn't mean to imply
funding
that,
their
Jill.
positions. I think they
that's-
did, but you didn't.
Well, that may be, but I just want to make sure that we close the loop with them, either that we explain to them how they're misapprehending what the circumstances are, or, that we work that out. That's all I'm trying to
Sure. Okay.
achieve.
Let's move on before I get more in the weeds.
Oh, the other item, sorry, there was another item on this list. It was the Respite, New Riders Cove Respite Adult Day Program. It's funded by the grant in 2025, but we're going to have to appropriate in 2024 for this program. So just another item to keep in mind.
And there's no chance of a grant for another year? Do we know?
I don't know that. Leah might be able to answer
Okay,
that question
okay.
more, but as of right now, we're looking at funding it and do the
Okay.
operational budget.
Okay, thank you.
But we have applied.
We have a, what?
We've applied for a grant. Have we applied?
Oh, yes, we got the grant for 2025. Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
But I think the.
No, but I'm
the
asking
underlying
about
assumption-
26,
I know.
yeah.
I think the underlying assumption was it was a 1-year grant. We would have to fund those positions.
I thought that was the case, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those grants are for just the availability of the grants from the state on that program is just to start up the program.
Yep.
It was.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure they have continuing operation. I know, it's a good question. We should
It is a
look
good
into
question.
Don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, oh, sure.
So on to the capital improvement plan. The town of Chatham has a capital improvement plan that reflects the community's needs and is reviewed and updated annually and fits within the financial plan that reflects the community's ability to pay. The capital improvement plan is a 5-year plan which includes one-time capital items, annual capital items, multi-year projects, large projects, and select board priorities. So this slide goes over the capital budget for 2025 that was requested. In 2025, the departmental request was around $10.4 million, and we funded $2.4 million, which was funded through free cash and other available funds. Looking at the town's current 5-year capital plan in ClearGov, as of yesterday, October 21st, 2024, there was $14.5 million entered for FY 2026. $12 million entered for FY 2027, 5.8 for FY 28, 1.9 for 2029, and $2 million for FY 30. looking through the items entered for the capital for 2026, they include items such as replace the salt shed for 1.5 for the DPW, 400,000 for a new ambulance for the fire department, 700,000 for the Little Mill Pond Pier, 300,000 for the exterior rehab of the harbor master's office at Old Mill Boatyard, and 500,000 for the townwide financial software. Some of these items could be from last year's, the 10.4 that rolled over to 2026, but those are the larger items that I did see in there.
And Carrie, just to be clear, when you say they were entered, these are requests submitted electronically by department heads into the central software and budgeting system?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
A wish list.
The wish list, yes.
Are these carryovers indefinite until the project is undertaken and completed?
So they get rolled over to the next year unless, and they'll stay in there unless the department decides they no longer need something and they can remove the item.
They can stay there for 2 or 3 years.
They can.
Still fund a project. They could stay there for 2 or 3 years and still fund a project that's not yet completed?
Correct.
Okay.
So other potential articles, these requests are due December 13th, and these are, well, the community preservation projects are actually due November 1st. So other capital items to keep in mind are the community preservation articles, future attainable housing developments, dredging capital for the town, the transfer station improvement project, then there's the Center for Active Living, funding for the town's drinking water and for the master plan and wastewater infrastructure. Those are just a few to mention of capital requests. And there's also items from the Monomoy Regional School that we want to take into consideration as well. So they have boilers and circular pumps at the middle school for 1.3 million, replacing the middle school roof for about 4.7 million. And in FY 2025, there were items mentioned for the Chatham Elementary School for replacing the roof around 2.4 million, replacing boilers in the elementary school around 900,000, and replacing carpet for 160,000. So as we move forward in the budget, those are, some of the items that we want to consider and
Carrie,
keep in
just a
mind.
quick question, if I might, for Scott.
Yeah.
Are any of these things on your roster, potential candidates for state funding, prospectively?
So the roofs would be, and we should find out by the end of this month whether or not the middle school roof is on the list. Apparently, I say tongue-in-cheek, we made the short list of over 70 roof projects in Massachusetts after a several-year hiatus. But we're hopeful and optimistic that we'll hear in the affirmative here later this month, but we won't know until the end of October. So the elementary school roof, we'd go through the same process. We started with the middle school and the middle school siding project. So that's sort of the first thing, but the elementary school, at least it's outer, the roof and looking at are there other aspects that need to get, sort of improved to make sure the envelope's good and tight.
Is there any reason to think that the recent amendments to the operating agreement, essentially, putting the elementary school on Chatham's bill would impact or affect Chatham's chances of getting state funding for those kind of things?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Corey?
Now, for this little slide, I just want to put a little plug in that I want to be very optimistic that we can make some move forward with the transfer station, because that's kind of a focal topic of my interest, both with frankly addressing the working conditions that we made promises to our staff that we can improve those, and I'd like to get that done sooner rather than later. And then, for anyone who's gone there on a regular basis, we are crystal clear the floor in that blue building needs to be replaced.
Yep.
I think washing it and cleaning it and cleansing it is just Band-Aiding, because it goes right back, the bacteria goes right back in there. And hopefully at some point in time, we can get that project done sooner than later. But it also opens up questions about, it has to probably be done in the wintertime, because we're certainly not gonna shut down the blue building in the summer. And then there's potential other policy questions about usage and how the facility is used, who uses it, et cetera, et cetera. So, and those probably should come a little bit earlier in the process. So I do hope we can make some movement forward on the transfer station.
Yes.
So just to, first of all, I would endorse that. But secondly, am I correct that the number on that is around 2.9 or 3?
The last, yeah, it was around, was it 2.9? Yeah,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
okay, moving on. So community priorities, initiatives, social infrastructure. Looking through the budget process, we look at items that are priority to the town, new programs and current programs, such as the child care vouchers and the Dr. Florence Selden Preschool Family Support Program. We look at the human services budget. And also on this slide is mentioned the Riders Cove Respite Program again. Sorry. Another item to mention is the community priorities for the housing initiatives such as the Stepping Stones parcel and the Old Harbor Road for attainable housing and potential town contribution. We have to think about the funding for the respite, which I just said. So those are other priorities that, that we look at when we go through the budget.
Carrie?
Yes.
What was expended out of the family support program, the preschool support?
I believe it was $110,000 this year.
Out of what was the total again that we funded?
The total amount that was funded for this year was $110,000.
Okay.
Yep.
We funded about 400,000
Right.
2 years ago, and we've been never able to carry it over as well.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome. Debt service. So overall, the town's level of debt service has declined from just over 20% in 2013 to just under 15% at 14.9% in 2025. This is a moderate this is on the moderate side as the town continues to upgrade infrastructure and has been seeking alternative sources for funding rather than borrowing. Chatham is ahead of the curve in regard to the sewering and to the town. The trend is favorable. However, the town will need to bond before the end of the fiscal year, which may impact on the percent. But we do not predict that it would go over 20%.
Do you have a guesstimate as to what the size of that bonding might be?
I don't.
Okay.
We're still very early in this stage. I mean, we've only had 4 or 5 months. So, I mean, it could be, I don't know. I don't want to estimate because I don't really know.
Well, if you said 20%, what would that limit would that impose?
Well, it's based on your total expenses, your total budget, this slide right here, minus your debt. So that's what you're looking at. So it's based on, it's kind of it's a weird chart that it's from, I think it's called the,
Financial indicator.
yes,
Yeah.
financial indicator, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll know more once we get closer.
Carrie, just to that end,
This is-
do all of our bondings or the majority of our bondings call for the concurrent payment of principal as well as interest as we consider debt service?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. This is a graph on our general fund existing debt. It shows the current general fund's existing debt as of June 30th, 2024. As we last borrowed in June for the closing of fiscal year 24. Looking at the chart, you will see the debt increase in 2026 from 2025. And this is actually due to the Mass Clean Water. We have preliminary debt schedules that we received from them. And one of our first payments for 4 of our clean waters are in 2026. So those payments will begin then. So that's why you see for 2025, a drop between, and then it go up in 2026 on the slide. They are 0% interest, however, but the principal payments will be due.
Do we always, when we issue debt, is our principal payment over the life of the debt, is it our policy to make that equal over the life of, annual equally over the life of the debt?
I don't think it's equally across the life of the debt, no. I think it changes, it fluctuates.
Okay,
Yep,
okay, thank you.
you're welcome. This slide goes over the water fund debt as of 6/30/2024. Again, we still have projects that, approved projects that have not been authorized yet for debt. So this graph is just showing the outstanding debt for the water fund. As you can see, I know like Joanne already mentioned, it drops off, but it could go back up again as we borrow.
And Carrie, where in these two slides does the sewering debt exist? Is that in the general fund?
The sewer is in the general fund, yes.
Oh, it is, okay.
It's
thank you.
just, yeah, so this is just water.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And at some point, if I might, just to remind us what we have invested in our sewer, our wastewater. Over time, since day one, what have we invested since day one in our wastewater? Would love to know that.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's a sizable number. Thanks.
Oh. yep, we can look at that.
Well over 100 million.
Thank you.
Over 100, that's for sure.
Do you guys have any other questions on the debt right now? No? Okay. Other post-employment benefits funding. The trust fund has a balance of $5.4 million. We are required annually to contribute 1.8, so approximately 700,000 is included in the benefits as pay-as-you-go, and 150,000 is from overlay. There's a 1.5% tax, and that funds the additional funding source for that, for the OPEB. As of right now, the net OPEB liability is 14.6 as of June 30th, 2023. It has been as high as 19.1 as a liability in 2019. We have not received the newest Siegel reports yet for the June 30th, 2024. And once we get those, I will let you know what the outstanding net liability is. Recommendations review. So the next slide is as presented in your packets. This is a list of topics and interests or concerns to the members of the Finance Committee as the town works on the 2024 budget. I don't know if Stephen wants to go over any of these right now or just highlight.
I'm happy to do a quick flyby.
Okay.
I'm happy to do a quick flyby. I think free cash, our position's been pretty clear.
Yep.
Potable water infrastructure, similarly, Shireen made the mention of the prospective new well and the recent hydrologic study. Important stuff, obviously, as we've repeatedly said, is the egg on which our goose sits, so we need to take good care of it. We did learn, I think, in one of our meetings last budget season that we had a couple of municipal assets that were not on the insurance roster, which kind of struck us as a glaring omission. So I think, however that gets looked after, I think we further learned that we don't have an insurance advisor formally for the town of Chatham. And that just, again, seems like something we should think about. The CHOP program houses, I think we've talked about this a couple of times with the expiring restrictions on the deeds. I think they're coming due in the next several years. To me, from kind of a negotiating perspective, it might be advantageous to, I think we have more leverage now before they expire, or when they're about to expire, than when they do. And were we to approach an owner of a home and say, here's $100,000 or whatever the number is, would you like to? So I think that's something, we think that's something that should be really thoughtfully considered. We discussed in the spring with Jill the idea of a recurring capital project update. Semi-annually was thrown out. I think quarterly was as well discussed, but I think landing on that and kind of trying to begin to execute on that would help not only the finance committee, but I think the community broadly in generating and maintaining support for these big capital projects. Specific budgetary concerns, we don't really need to get in the weeds here, but the South Jog Walkway at the pier at $700,000. All the employees I've spoken to down at the pier think that's a completely unnecessary expenditure. That some modifications to the Jersey barriers would work just fine. Chamber of Commerce allocation has been the subject of discussion internally in the committee about, given the crowds that we generate and maintain through the summers and shoulder seasons, do we as a town continue to have to fund these guys $85,000 a year when they haven't changed their due structure in rememberable history? And staffing levels have been touched on briefly. We've got a lot of stuff going on. If we don't have the staff to thoughtfully and effectively manage them, it's a kind of a management failure, and it's something that, this committee's been historically had reservations about throwing on staff. But as we've said to Jill before, if these things if compelling arguments are made for why we need these things, we should consider that. Just three in particular that were raised: project management, finance, and the prospect of a grant writer. So we can come back to this stuff when we're mid-season, but these are just, we want to get these things on the table as concerns of the committee.
Thank you very much. The FY 2026 budget guidelines. So we're asking departments to provide a level service budget, which allows us to incorporate funding to have the flexibility to respond to unforeseen situations. As we work through the FY 2026 budget, we will anticipate continued expenses, but will like departments to look critically at the areas for savings. We will be working with departments in the next few weeks, and we will be looking at the last 2 fiscal years of closing as we go through 2026. Operational and capital budgets are due November 15th for 2026. And then, we're asking, obviously, departments look at their fees, so that's one thing that we should probably be looking at. So staying on the course for 2026, we'll continue our forward thinking to meet the goals and objectives of the select board and the expectations of the community. So this is the 2026 budget timeline calendar. It's also included in the packet that was presented to you. Some of the key dates to remember that you have seen in the past are up on the slide. Again, November 15th, the operating capital budgets are due. December 13th, fiscal articles are due to the town manager. Around January 15th, we'll be receiving the Monomoy Regional School budget. January 21st, the town manager recommended budgets are going to be presented to the select board and FinCom. February 18th, the finance committee recommendations are due to the select board. And February 25th, the select board approved budgets are to the FinCom. March 11th, finance committee recommendations. March 21st, annual town meeting warrant goes to the printer. And May 2025, we don't have a date yet, the annual town meeting.
Carrie or Jill, whoa.
I thought you'd like that.
Can you do that again?
You want to
Some
see
of
it
us
again?
missed it.
Hold on.
So Carrie and or Jill, I guess just a question from the perspective of the Finance Committee, having now just focused on that lovely origami. If we revert to the Select Board on 18 February with our observations, will that be sufficient time, a week, for you guys to kind of process any thinking that is processable that we might present and kind of react and accordingly? Seems just kind of a narrow window for us to for the Select Board to digest what's certainly going to be a compelling work of financial analysis.
Yes, in the past, and I certainly defer to the Select Board, but the presentation or the recommendations that FinCom provides are very high level on the meeting before the transmittal of the budget. So I'll defer to the Select Board, but we do have a bylaw that requires that the budget be transmitted to the FinCom. So technically, FinCom, or in the past, wouldn't actually start the review until the budget was transmitted, but that's many years ago. So our practice is to kick off the budget in January, and then both boards get started. If, however, you'd be interested in maybe doing like one joint session for some budgets, maybe a Saturday or a designated or a night, so maybe it's general government. Again, I'm getting in the weeds. It's only because we tend to, staff provides a budget presentation to the Select Board, and then it's to FinCom. And I understand that there's different perspectives and questions asked. It's just, it's a long 6-week period of having 2 to 3 meetings in a week for essentially the same presentation. So don't have to let me know now if you want to consider that.
And that actually anticipates what I was about to say, which is that obviously we would like to have adequate opportunity to receive and digest and discuss what we hear from the FinCom. Maybe a joint meeting is a good idea, and I think it also depends as we get closer and begin to see what's in the budget and what are the big issues. How does the public feel about what's going on? All of those would help inform a decision that I don't think, as you were suggesting, we need to make tonight. It might be good if there were a bigger window there that we had more time, or it might be that a joint meeting makes sense. But maybe we can sort that out a little bit more clearly in January or even late December.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my reaction. Dean?
My reaction is different. This has come up before. I was on the FinCom. I've been on the Select Board. When the budgets are presented to the Select Board, they're presented in a rather high-level manner. When the FinCom goes into the budget, they look at every line item. And if we have a joint meeting with the FinCom, we're going to be there for endless hours. I don't think it's productive. You know, I just think the process has worked so far. I don't really think it needs tinkering. That's my opinion. I know we're not going to take any votes on it tonight, but I just thought I'd express my view, Mr. Chairman.
As you always do,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Vice Chair.
I appreciate your letting me do that.
I've served on both as well, and it is a line-by-line review of each departmental budget that is exhausting. No, it's exhaustive. I mean, you guys, it's not what we do. You're absolutely correct, but we need your input because it's invaluable. Before I quiet, I want to say one other thing. We've talked about year-round housing a bit, and we talked about educational excellence and a vibrant and sustainable local economy, water management, wastewater management, responding effectively to the needs of the community. But there's one larger macro issue that is of concern that I think we just want to keep in our forefront and be thinking about. And that's when the outer beach washes over in a moontide without an easterly wind, we got to take notion. We got to pay attention. When you go down in a boat and look at Morris Island and what's going on south Morris Island and south to the south, we got to pay attention because we have a vibrantly changing or rapidly changing coastal environment here in town. The Morris Island Dike, the roadways, the flooding in the roadways, we've got to pay attention, and that's could be. I'm not arguing to have anything baked into this budget, but I think we need to keep thinking about what that means for this town financially and what kind of commitment we're going to make for coastal resiliency, because it could be a big one. And we've got so many other issues out there. I just think this one's even larger than the issues we have standing now.
You look at the maps of town from 1868, and Horns Marina and the whole Horns Cottage area was a swamp, which it is slowly or maybe quickly reverting to in some respects.
The dynamism of the ocean down off Morris Island is just unbelievable. It's unbelievable how dynamic it is. It's very powerful, and it's really reshaping our coastline and our interior coastline, not the outer beach, although the outer beach is affected as well, big time.
Thank you
Anyway.
for bringing that up, because we had it in our staff report, but I know coastal resiliency, climate adaptation certainly keeps Greg Berman up at night. He reminds
Yeah.
me every time I see him, so thank you for bringing that up.
So just a final word on the scheduling. Again, I sort of raised the question because it's more of a topic for the select board than it is for us. I'm happy, and I'm sure we speak for the entire committee, we'd be happy to consider any kind of process efficiencies that can make Carrie's life a little easier, and, you know, I'm certainly happy to query the committee on a Saturday or a whatever. So,
Thank you.
happy to chat.
Okay.
Are we okay with that, where we sit right now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So in case you didn't have a lot of questions or comments, which you have, and it's been very productive, just put a prompt up about if there's anything, any additional budget factors or community priorities we should consider as we prepare for the FY 2026 budget.
So Jill, normally the public is not shy about raising their hand and asking questions, but just for the record and for good order's sake, let me note that we've had an invitation outstanding all evening for public comment, and if, one last time, if anybody has anything, they are welcome to do that. Yeah, no, I understand.
I have a question, too.
Yeah, so go ahead, Shireen, and then we'll turn it over to Scott and Michael.
I just have a comment again, too. I think the coastal resiliency issue is going to be like a big topic very quickly. But the other piece is that we're having some meetings with, we had mass municipal legislation update the other day, and some of the things that are coming out of other communities and concerns is still that community sustainability year-round issue. And I think that we should be looking at, I'm not talking about budgeting for anything for this year, but I think we should have a deep dive back into where we're going to have to start putting, town assets in to be a survivable community. That is not going away, and it should be a priority for us because it helps inform the schools. We're building affordable housing, which is great, but there are other factors involved here that we have taken a look at in the past that we should be looking at again.
Shirley, just for the sake of clarity, you sort of from a social perspective, or
Yeah, I think.
was it Jeff's kind of physical?
Yeah, I think it is a social perspective we should be looking at. If we're going to have a thriving community and not become a resort, we really do have to be mindful of this, because we can be spending all kinds of money on beautiful things, but if we don't have a substantial community, then we don't have anything.
Fully agreed.
Ditto.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, if we're referring to the same meeting, Shireen, I'm not sure we are, but I'll assume we are. The state is very much aware of some of the challenges that Shireen is referring to, particularly year-round and housing, and the state is looking to be a partner with us, but there's going to need to be cooperation and collaborative work to achieve some of the objectives that are important to us. And I see that as a positive, but it's also a recognition of what the needs that Shireen is referring to, and the need to be helpful to the extent that they can.
You're spot on that.
Thank you. Please.
Scott Carpenter, Superintendent, Michael McMillan, our Business Manager. I can give you sort of an overview of what we're looking at the schools. In terms of enrollment, our Chatham students had a really small reduction. We've only seen a reduction in 2 Chatham students over the previous year. So in our school system, we've got 349 Chatham students, so a reduction of 2 is a 0.5 decrease in, or decrease in enrollment for Chatham. Harwich actually saw a slightly, or proportionally larger decrease. Chatham Elementary School, we're seeing at both elementary schools decreased enrollment. I think when I came here 12 years ago, there was a bubble that was at the kindergarten level at that time. That bubble are now seniors, and so we're at this point where a high school that we built for 700 students is what MSBA gave us the funding for 700 students, has 750 students in the high school because many of the families that had been going out chose to come back, and I think that's benefited us. We've seen a lot less money flowing out from our district to other school districts. So we're seeing some rewards of the academic program. We also recognize that we need to keep investing in that academic program. We're not seeing the outcomes that we want to see for students. We're really focused on Tier 1 classroom instruction and improving that. We're also starting to see just some demographic shifts happening. So we have to be flexible in terms of addressing the children that are in front of us. We are seeing increasing numbers of students who come from homes that speak another language, and that happens. I would say even more at Chatham Elementary School than Harwich Elementary School. But we have year after year seen a need to increase English language learner supports in our schools. I think so we have we have a lot of things where while our enrollment at the high school has gone up, when we look beyond this year, we can start imagining that the high school is going to start ticking down in enrollment as sort of smaller and smaller cohorts of students come up through the ranks. So I'm just trying to think of some of the other things that we, as we mentioned, there's the roof that we'll hear about. We have architects that have been doing a study of the middle school siding. So we went before the towns thinking, okay, this is how much it's going to cost based on quotes that we had to reside the building. When we brought in architects, we think that project's going to be more, so there'll be a presentation before the school committee from the architects this week. And then as the month closes out, hopefully we'll hear from the state whether we make the list on the roofing project at the middle school. So I do anticipate in the near future us seeing changes and seeing that outer envelope of the middle school get tightened down and improved, which will be great because it's a fantastic building, and we want to go and keep a great building, great for years to come. I don't know, Michael, if there are other things that you want to talk about that we didn't hit on.
No, I mean, I think so. We're presenting our five-year outlook to the school committee this week, and just the challenges the superintendent outlined already, the need for ongoing capital investment. Although the student numbers are going down, their needs are changing and increasing, and that's driving our staffing changes. And also, as was discussed earlier, recruitment has been an issue. It's encouraging to hear that you're getting more applications for positions, but recruiting and retaining staff continues to be a challenge, and that does drive up our costs. And another challenge we're just going to be facing is, so we have fewer, just because of the way the enrollment's changing, we have fewer places available for school choice students coming into the district. And that has been a source of revenue for us in the past. It's helped to offset the budget and assessments. And we'll have fewer spaces going forward. And so we'll have fewer students coming in because we can't accommodate them, but that will mean a reduction in our revenue associated with that. So
Just to provide some clarity behind that, so you can think of there's physical space within the building, but if you open up an entire classroom and fill it up with school choice students, it ends up being a cost to the two towns. So filling up a classroom of students at $5,000 a student ends up costing the town significantly more than the $80,000 to $100,000 that those students are bringing in. It costs far more than that in terms of the teacher's salary, the teacher's benefits, a support staff's salary, and a support staff's benefits. So when we say our district is getting smaller, if we look a decade ago, Chatham Elementary School had 3 classes per grade level. Chatham Elementary School today has, in most of the grades, 2 classes per grade level. So there's just fewer classrooms that might have a free seat to go and bring in a school choice student. So as we have fewer classrooms, there's just fewer possibilities for free seats. The demand is still out there. Right now we are the place that families would love to send their children. That's what we want to have, but we also have to be mindful of being good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar in terms of opening classrooms and not seeing us just fill up a classroom with children from another town. That's, I think, sort of the model that Chatham had before we regionalized, where the per pupil expenditures for Chatham were much higher than Harwich because there were so many students that were in the schools coming from other school districts, that Chatham was essentially subsidizing the cost of education there. So we've been sort of approaching school choice through a free seat model, but as we have fewer classrooms in our contracting district, there are just fewer spots for free seats.
Please.
Thank you. Is there not a way or a mechanism to have the amount that it's charged for an out-of-district student be commensurate with what it would cost?
So for school choice, it was set by the legislature in the 70s. So, and it was set at 5,000 and has never changed. So I think, for the school districts that have a lot of students that head out, you could imagine changing that number would have a huge impact on their budget.
Scott, I've got 2 questions, if I could, please. Do you have visibility in what you think the stabilized enrollment, or Michael, would be at the high school? If we're trending off a high of 750?
So I think if we look at, Michael's been plotting this out, but we have, I think, what our cohort sizes that are graduating are roughly around in the 140s. But if we look at what's our like cohorts in the elementary schools,
910.
yeah. So we're looking at going from like 147 is a graduating cohort heading out, but the incoming cohort 12 years down the road is around 109, and that and it's hard to say where that 109 is going to go. I think a lot of it is really going to depend on the housing conversations that happen across the region. So right now, even with us, like we we went into this last round of contract negotiations, as an administration, as a school committee, and definitely as a union on the other side, wanting to make sure that we could have have our salaries be something that was regionally competitive and that would allow people to stay here and be on the Cape. But, but each year we have young individuals who have been renting. We hire that young teacher, they rent, and they get to that point where it's like, okay, I'm now married, it's time to lay down roots, but I can't afford to lay down roots here. And, so you don't want to continue to become the farm team for off Cape. And that's, that's what has been happening. I think we've been luckier in the last couple of years. I think people have been finding housing, but we're still seeing young staff head off Cape. We have far fewer openings this year. I think you asked the question of Jill, like how many open slots do you have out there in your staffing? Last year we had more than a handful of instructional assistants that just weren't filled all year long. This year, I think we probably are down to one instructional assistant that's not filled. So I think the contract that we agreed to with our union has helped on that front. I think we're seeing some stabilization there. But I do worry just what it takes to go and keep good young staff here.
So my second question is, it seems evident, and I could certainly be incorrect in my assessment of it, but it seems as though over the last several years that your budgetary efforts have met with some resistance from Harwich, just insofar as cuts and prospective cuts and staffing and the like. If I'm right, has it gotten to a point where it's becoming problematic for the quality of the education you and your team looks to deliver? I mean, one observation that you mentioned was you weren't satisfied with student outcomes presently. Is that ultimately a policy question or an execution question? And if it's policy, is there anything that the town of Chatham can do to kind of weigh in on that conversation relative to the town of Harwich?
I would say I think while when we come to the Chatham boards and present our budget, I think there's maybe less requests metaphorically to sharpen our pencil than when we go to Harwich. In the recent years, the Harwich boards, both the FinCom and the Select Board, have been supportive of our budget. They definitely have asked good questions and pushed back, but they have been supportive. And at the same time, I think there are questions that their board has asked in terms of the regional agreement, and have just wondered about, is the regional agreement as fair to Harwich as it is to Chatham? And I know we've had some conversations between the school, the town, and both towns, regarding that. But I think I think we've been blessed to have support, ever since I've been here, from the Harwich community, for our budget.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
Dean, sorry.
Speaking of Harwich, so what is the enrollment situation with Harwich? Have they gone up or down? We lost two students.
So Harwich's enrollment compared to Chatham is they have 1,155, and I think that's just, I believe that's over the last year. That's a change of, I think, just one child. So they've been holding fairly level. Harwich Elementary School, compared to, if we look at just the enrollment that's going on at the elementary level, Chatham Elementary School's down 2% this year compared to last year. Harwich Elementary School's down 3% this year to last year. So there's, so there's, but again, it's, I think post-COVID right now, I think it's hard to say, what the cohorts are year after year. We had a very small cohort last year in Harwich. We had a cohort that was large enough last year to have 2 sections of kindergarten in Chatham. This year, we just have 1 section of kindergarten at Chatham Elementary School.
Anything else? I think we're good. Do we have somebody online? I don't see anybody online. Is there anybody online? I don't see anybody.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to adjourn your meeting?
I would like to adjourn my meeting. Motion to adjourn our meeting. And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Eddie. Tommy is not here. Barbara? Approve. John? Aye. Joanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Aye.
Tracy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Chairs in favor.
And from our side?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Dyken?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And Mr. Shell says aye. We are adjourned at 7:16 PM. Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much.